Hello, I'm Jeremy, and today we're going to be working on this 2012 Ford Escape. We're going to be replacing the brakes, and if you need brakes for your car, find the TRQ brand because they're rigorously tested. I've used them on my own car, and they fit perfectly every time. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is loosen the lug nuts on the wheel. We want to do that while the car is on the ground so the wheel doesn't turn while we're turning the lug nuts. This is a 19mm socket that I'm using on a 1/2-inch breaker bar, by the way. All right, so now that the car is up in the air, we can take our 19mm and we can spin off the rest of the lug nuts. With the lug nuts off, we can take the wheel off. Now we want to remove the caliper, and to do that, we're going to need a 7mm Allen. We're going to put that on a 3/8 drive ratchet and pop it right in here, the upper caliper bolt. We're going to remove the top one, and then we'll go to the bottom one. You'll notice that there's these plastic caps that cover up the Allen head bolts, and these things just protect it from the elements. So now we'll take the bottom one out. You'll notice that there's a clip right here that holds pressure from the caliper to the caliper bracket. We need to take this clip off. So the way to do that is to get some groove jaw pliers and apply some pressure up on this, and then you should be able to kind of pop that out. You'll want to wear some safety glasses because these springs can fly off unexpectedly. And now we should be able to pull this caliper off, like so. You'll see this pad actually has a bracket on the back that slides into the caliper piston, so we'll just pop that out, set it right back in place. Now we're going to use a bungee cord or something similar to hang the caliper from the strut. And we want to do that to prevent the caliper from hanging on the brake hose itself. All right, that should get it out of the way. Now we're going to pull the brake pads off of the calipers. Yours are going to obviously be much more worn out than this. This vehicle already has brand new brakes on it, so we're just showing you how to replace them even though it already has brand new brakes. We have 2 caliper bracket bolts, one up here and one down here. They're both 18mm, and we're going to remove those next. Now we can pull the caliper bracket off the vehicle. Now we can pull the rotor off the car. This one is brand new and it's on a brand new hub, so we're kind of cheating. In real life, when you pull this caliper bracket off, you end up with a rusty rotor on a rusty hub. And these things can be tough to get off sometimes. So one trick to do to get the rotor off is you hit in between these studs with a hammer, and if you bounce from this side to this side and this side to this side, it usually frees the whole thing up from the hub, and then you can just pull it right off. Here we have the caliper bracket. Now we want to make sure that this is nice and clean because the brake pads actually slide on this. So these end up being very rusty and covered in scale. So what we want to do is wire brush it, and you'll want to hit it with some brake parts cleaner. That way it's nice and clean for the brake pads. Ship it. So now we want to put the rotor on. Now your hub may be rusty, so you're going to want to clean off any loose rust that's on the hub. In this case, we obviously have a brand new one, so it'll just slide right on. Hopefully. Now we can take the caliper bracket, slide it up here over the rotor, and put the 2 bolts in that hold the caliper bracket to the knuckle. Now we're going to torque these to 129 foot-pounds with our 18mm socket and torque wrench. All right, so now we can remove the caliper from the bungee cord and remove that from the strut, of course. All right, and now we need to compress this piston so that you can slide it over your brake pads. So we like to do that with a large C-clamp. There's a variety of different ways you can do this, but C-clamp seems to work the best for us. If you have an old brake pad, you can put it right here and you don't have to spin this down so much. But since we don't have an old brake pad in this scenario, because we already have new ones on the car, we're just basically going to push down on the center of the piston and compress it. Okay, that's compressed. So here's our brake pad that goes inside the caliper piston. We're going to put a little grease just on the edges of it, where it meets the caliper bracket, and that way it can slide nicely in there. Then maybe throw a little bit up here where it meets the piston as well. And then we should be able to slide this right in. Do your best not to get grease on the pad like I just did. Now I got to clean that off. For the outer pad, again, we'll put a little bit of grease here, just enough to kind of make it slippery. And then we'll do a little bit down here as well. And then you should be able to drop it right into place on the outside. Now we can slide our caliper right back onto our caliper bracket with the brake pads in place. We'll push these two 7mm Allen bolts right back in and start screwing them into the caliper bracket. Now these two caliper bolts are torqued to 18 foot-pounds. And now we can reinstall these two plastic caps that cover those bolts. This bracket needs to be put back in place, so you should be able to just kind of snap it in place like that. When you're done with the brake job, you always want to get all of your greasy fingerprints off of the rotor and obviously off the pads, because you obviously don't want to grease your brakes. So we're going to spray it down with some brake parts cleaner and then wipe it down with a rag. And you want to make sure you do the front side and the back side. All right, so now we're going to get in here and we're going to pump the brakes to make sure they're all pumped up and you don't have any surprises when you go to try and move your car. All right, feels pretty firm, so I think we're ready to put the wheel on. So now we're going to pick up the wheel and put it right back on and throw the lug nuts on. All right, there we go. You always want to start all your lug nuts by hand because you don't want to cross-thread any of them, because once you've cross-threaded the lug nuts, you have a really bad day. All right, we've got our 19mm socket and our torque wrench, so we're going to torque each one of these to 100 foot-pounds. Going to do it in a star pattern, and that way the wheel is torqued nice and evenly. All right, there we are.